The rain had been falling since dawn, a soft and steady rhythm that seemed to wash the streets clean but left the air heavy with silence. In a small town far from the noise of the big cities, an elderly man sat alone in his tiny tea shop. His hands were trembling as he held a cup, not because of the cold, but because of the pain that had been growing inside his chest for months. His name was Raghav. For decades, he had been a quiet presence in the town, brewing tea for strangers and friends, always smiling, always listening. But now, his smile had faded. The pain was becoming unbearable. Raghav had known Narendra Modi in his youth, back when life was simple and the world seemed wide open with possibilities. They had shared long walks, dreams whispered under the stars, and the belief that kindness could change everything. Time had pulled them apart, as life often does, sending Modi into the world of politics and Raghav into a quiet corner of life where he made a living with his small shop. Still, whenever Modi visited the area in those early years, he would stop by for tea, and they would laugh like boys again. But now, the shop was empty. Customers had stopped coming because Raghav could no longer work properly. Each breath felt heavy, each movement slow. The local doctor had told him he needed urgent heart surgery. The cost was far beyond anything he could imagine. He had no family left to help, and the thought of reaching out to Modi now, one of the most powerful men in the country, felt impossible. He didn't want to disturb him, and he didn't want pity. Miles away, Sundar Pichai was in his office in California. His day was packed with meetings, presentations, and deadlines. Yet something strange happened that morning. He received a short, almost forgotten letter in his personal inbox. It was from a journalist he knew back in India. The message was brief, almost hesitant. "There is an old man in a small town who needs urgent help. I thought you should know because of who he once was, to Narendra Modi." Attached was a photograph of Raghav sitting behind the counter of his tea shop, his face pale, but his eyes still holding a spark of quiet dignity. Sundar stared at the image for a long time. He didn't know Raghav personally. He had never met him, but something in that photograph pulled at him, a mix of strength and fragility, of pride and hidden pain. He asked his assistant to gather every detail about Raghav's situation. Within hours, he knew everything. He learned about Raghav's friendship with Modi, about his years of serving T2 travelers, about the life he had built with almost nothing, and about the surgery he could not afford. That evening, Sundar sat alone in his home office, the city lights blinking in the distance. He could have moved on with his day, told himself it wasn't his responsibility, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was something he had to do quietly, without any publicity, without making it about himself. He picked up his phone and made one call, not to Modi, but to a hospital in India. He told them to prepare for Raghav's surgery, to treat him with the best care possible, and to send the bill to him directly. He gave strict instructions. Raghav was never to know who paid for it. Sundar wanted him to believe it was simply covered by a community fund or a kind stranger. What Sundar didn't know was that this single decision would set off a chain of events. Neither he nor Modi could have predicted events that would reveal old wounds, hidden truths, and the deep power of human kindness. As the rain continued to fall, far away in his small tea shop, Raghav took another slow sip of tea, unaware that help was already on its way, carried by the hands of someone he had never met, someone who believed that sometimes the quietest acts of kindness could change a life forever. 2 days later, a young man walked into Raghav's tea shop. He was wearing a simple white shirt, his hair still wet from the rain outside. He ordered a cup of tea and sat quietly at a corner table, watching Raghav with careful eyes. Raghav noticed but didn't say anything. He moved slowly now, his hands shaking slightly as he poured the tea. After a while, the young man spoke softly. "Uncle, you should close early today. There is a hospital van coming to pick you up." Raghav laughed weakly. "Hospital van? Young man, I don't have that kind of money. Even if I go, who will pay?" My shop barely earns enough for food. The young man smiled, almost mysteriously. It's already taken care of. Someone has paid for your treatment. They said you must not worry about anything. Raghav froze, the cup of tea halfway to his lips. He felt a mix of confusion and suspicion. Who would do that for me? I don't have anyone. The young man shook his head. They didn't leave a name, just instructions to make sure you get there safely. That night, Raghav lay awake in his small room above the tea shop. He kept thinking about the stranger who had paid for his surgery. Was it a mistake? Had the hospital confused him with someone else? And if not, why would someone spend so much for a man they didn't know? Meanwhile, in Delhi, Narendra Modi was attending a community event when an elderly villager approached him. Sir, I heard Raghav from your old town is going to get surgery soon. Some big-hearted soul has arranged it. You must be happy. Modi stopped in his tracks. Raghav, the tea shop owner. The villager nodded. Yes, the same. He was very ill, but now they say the surgery will be the best available. I thought maybe you arranged it. Modi smiled faintly. No, I didn't. But inside, his mind was racing. Who else even knew about Raghav's situation? Later that night, Modi sat in his study, a cup of tea in hand. Old memories flooded back the way Raghav had offered him free tea during his early days, saying, "You will go far one day, but never forget where you came from." Modi had never forgotten, but politics and duty had kept him away. Now someone else had stepped in for his old friend, and Modi felt both gratitude and curiosity burning inside him. In California, Sundar Pichai received confirmation from the hospital. The van had reached the tea shop. Raghav would be admitted. The next morning, Sundar asked again that no one tell Raghav who had arranged it. But fate has a way of bending even the best-laid plans. A hospital clerk, careless with paperwork, left a file in the wrong place, one that carried Sundar Pichai's name, and the person who would soon see it was someone neither Sundar nor Modi expected. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and quiet fear. Raghav sat on a narrow bed, the white sheet tucked neatly under him. His old wool shawl was draped around his shoulders. The nurses moved in and out of the room, their faces kind but hurried. He had never been in a big hospital before. The walls felt too white, the machines too loud. He kept wondering how much all of this must cost, and his chest tightened not from illness this time, but from the weight of not knowing who had done this for him. A young nurse came in with a clipboard. She smiled politely. "Uncle, we are preparing you for surgery tomorrow morning. Please rest tonight." Raghav hesitated. "Beta, may I ask you something? Who is paying for this? I need to know." The nurse looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, I'm not allowed to say. The bill has already been settled." She turned quickly and left, as if afraid that staying longer might make her slip. Meanwhile, in another part of the hospital, an administrative clerk was sorting through patient files. His desk was cluttered with forms, receipts, and medical reports. He picked up one folder that didn't belong in his section. On the cover was Raghav's name, and inside, among the typed medical details, was a payment confirmation, signed under the name Sundar Pichai. The clerk frowned. The name was too familiar to ignore. Everyone knew who Sundar Pichai was. Curiosity lit up in his eyes, but he shrugged and put the file back on the desk. But the folder didn't stay there. Later that evening, a hospital volunteer named Neeraj came to deliver tea to the staff. He spotted the folder lying open and froze when he saw the signature. Neeraj had grown up in the same town as Raghav. He had heard about his illness and the mysterious help. Now the answer was right in front of him. His first instinct was to run to Raghav and tell him everything, but something stopped him. Maybe it was respect for the person who had chosen to stay anonymous. Maybe it was the thought that revealing it might change the purity of the gift. Still, the knowledge burned inside him, and he wasn't sure how long he could keep it to himself. That night Raghav lay awake, the hospital's dim light flickering through the curtains. He thought about his younger days with Modi, about the choices that had led him here. Somewhere deep in his heart, he whispered a silent thank you to the unknown hand that had lifted him from despair. In California, Sundar checked his phone, one last time before bed. The hospital had confirmed the surgery was set for the morning. He didn't know that the first crack in his plan for secrecy had already formed. In Delhi, Modi received another message from his old hometown. This time, it wasn't just about Raghav's surgery, it was about a strange rumor starting to spread. The morning of the surgery arrived with a pale light creeping through the hospital windows. Raghav was dressed in a thin blue gown, his frail frame looking even smaller under the fabric. The nurses spoke in gentle voices, guiding him through the final preparations. But his mind was elsewhere. He kept thinking about the mysterious person who had paid for all of this. It felt like a story from another world, one where kindness arrived without reason, without asking for anything in return. In Delhi, Narendra, Modi sat at his desk, staring at his phone. The message from his hometown kept echoing in his mind. Someone has arranged the best treatment for Raghav, and they didn't even tell him who they are. Modi's instincts told him this wasn't an ordinary act of charity. There was purpose behind it, and he needed to know why. He called an old friend from the same town, a man who still knew everyone's business. Find out everything about Raghav's surgery, Modi said quietly. Who arranged it, where the money came from, everything. Back at the hospital, Neeraj, the volunteer who had seen Sundar Pichai's name, was struggling. He had promised himself he would keep the secret, but the weight of it was becoming unbearable. He saw Raghav sitting on the bed, looking out the window as if searching for an answer. Neeraj walked closer, but stopped short. "Uncle," he said, softly, "sometimes the best gifts come from people who don't want to be known. Maybe you should accept this without questions." Raghav turned his head, studying Neeraj's face. "You know something, don't you?" Neeraj hesitated. I just know you are cared for more than you realize." Then he quickly left, leaving Raghav even more curious. In California, Sundar received a video call from his assistant. "The hospital says everything is ready," she reported. "But sir, there's been a small issue. Some staff have noticed your name on the payment records. It might spread." Sundar leaned back in his chair, his jaw tightening. "Keep it quiet. If anyone asks, tell them it's a community fund. I don't want my name involved." But it was already too late. One of the hospital clerks, proud of the fact that such a famous man had helped a patient, had mentioned it casually to a friend. The friend had told another, and in a matter of hours, the whisper had reached a local news reporter, someone who was also known to Modi's old contacts. As Raghav was wheeled into the operating theater, unaware of the storm forming outside, two men miles apart, Modi in Delhi and Sundar in California, were now connected by a truth that was about to come out in the most unexpected way. The operating theater was bright and cold. Raghav lay on the table, his heart racing not only from fear, but from the deep uncertainty of the moment. The surgeons spoke softly to each other, their hands moving with skill and precision. Outside the room, Neeraj paced the hallway. He wanted to pray, but his mind was too busy thinking about the secret he carried. He knew it was only a matter of time before the truth reached Raghav. He didn't know if that would bring happiness or confusion in the waiting area. The hospital television was tuned to a local news channel. A short segment played just a few seconds long, but enough to set everything in motion. The anchor spoke in a calm voice. "Sources say global technology leader Sundar Pichai has quietly paid for the heart surgery of a small-town tea seller, a man who once knew Prime Minister Narendra Modi." The words hit Neeraj like a wave. He quickly turned off the television, but not before a nurse had heard it. Whispers began to pass through the hospital corridors. In Delhi, Modi was in a meeting when his phone buzzed. It was a news alert. He read the headline twice, his eyes narrowing. Sundar Pichai pays for surgery of PM's old friend. He leaned back in his chair, feeling a strange mix of gratitude and curiosity. After the meeting, he called his personal secretary. "Get me Sundar Pichai's direct contact. I want to speak with him as soon as possible." Meanwhile, in California, Sundar was in a conference when his phone vibrated with dozens of notifications. He saw the headlines, the tweets, the messages. The story had broken. Despite his efforts, the world now knew what he had done. He sighed quietly, knowing that his plan for complete secrecy had failed. Still, he felt no regret for helping Raghav, only for the attention it was now bringing. Hours later, the surgery was over. Raghav was moved to a recovery room. His heartbeat was stronger, his breathing easier. When he opened his eyes, he saw Niraj sitting beside him, his face full of relief. "You did it, uncle," Niraj said softly. "You're going to be fine." Raghav smiled faintly, but before he could speak, the door opened. A reporter stood there, holding a small notebook. "Sir," the reporter said gently, "how does it feel to know Sundar Pichai paid for your surgery?" The room went still. Raghav blinked in confusion. Ooh. And just like that, the truth had found its way to him. Raghav stared at the reporter, his mind slow to understand the words. Sundar Pichai, the name echoed in his ears. He had heard it many times in the news, but never imagined that someone so far away, someone he had never met, would care enough to save his life. "There must be some mistake," Raghav whispered. "Why would he do that for me?" The reporter smiled kindly. "Because kindness doesn't always need a reason." Then she left quietly, leaving the room in silence. Niraj sat beside him, watching the emotions play across his face. Raghav felt gratitude so deep it brought tears to his eyes, but also a strange humility. He wished he could thank Sundar in person, not to repay the gift because he knew he never could, but simply to let him know what it meant. In Delhi, Narendra Modi finally reached Sundar on a private line. His voice was calm but warm. "Ji, I have heard what you have done for my old friend. I wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart. You didn't have to do this, but you did, quietly, without seeking credit. That speaks volumes about your character." Sundar replied softly, "Sir, I only did what felt right. I didn't want him to know. It was never about recognition. It was about a man who deserved help, and I was in a position to give it." Modi paused for a moment. "Still, I think the three of us should meet. Not for the media, not for politics, just as people." A week later, in a quiet garden in Ahmedabad, the meeting took place. Raghav, still a bit weak but smiling, sat under the shade of a tree. Sundar arrived first, dressed simply, carrying a small box of sweets. When their eyes met, Raghav stood slowly and reached out his hand. "Thank you," he said, his voice trembling. "You saved my life." Sundar shook his head. "No, uncle, I only helped. You saved your own life by living it with dignity." Moments later, Modi joined them, the three men sitting together on a wooden bench. There was no press, no cameras, only the sound of leaves rustling in the wind. They spoke for hours, not about titles or achievements, but about the value of staying human, of remembering where you come from, and of never letting success make you forget the people who shaped you. As the sun began to set, Raghav looked at both men and said, "In life, you don't measure wealth by what you keep. You measure it by what you give away." And in that quiet moment, all three knew this was a memory they would carry for the rest of their lives, a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness can create ripples that travel across the world. Weeks passed after that quiet meeting in the garden, but its impact did not fade. Raghav returned to his tea shop, the same small wooden counter, the same steaming kettle, but something inside him had changed. His steps were slower, yet his smile was brighter. Every cup of tea he served carried a little more warmth, as if he was pouring gratitude into it. Customers who heard his story began visiting more often. Some came out of curiosity, others because they wanted to see the man whose life had been touched by two of the most respected figures in the world. But Raghav never spoke about the surgery in grand terms. Instead, he would say, "Someone helped me once. Now I must help others in any way I can." Sundar Pichai returned to his busy life in California, but the experience stayed with him. He often thought about how small actions, ones that barely touched the surface of the news, could mean everything to someone else. In private moments, he would remind himself that success was not just about innovation or leadership, but about humanity. Narendra. Modi too carried the memory. It reminded him of his own beginnings, the days when tea shops and quiet friendships shaped his values. He knew that in a world full of noise, the quiet acts often spoke the loudest. Then something unexpected began to happen. A young student who had visited Raghav's shop decided to raise funds for another villager in need. A small business owner, inspired by Sundar's humility, started offering free meals to workers who couldn't afford lunch. A retired teacher began tutoring poor children without charging them a rupee. These acts didn't make headlines, but they spread small ripples of kindness moving quietly from one heart to another. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the dusty road outside his shop, Raghav looked at the kettle whistling on the stove. A little boy stood by the counter, counting a few coins in his tiny hands. "Uncle," the boy said, "I don't have enough for tea today. Maybe tomorrow." Raghav smiled and slid a cup toward him. "Tea is free for you today, beta, and maybe one day you'll do the same for someone else." The boy's eyes lit up, and in that moment, Raghav knew the circle was complete. One quiet act had started it all. And so, the story of a tea seller, a prime minister, and a tech leader became more than just a headline. It became a reminder that kindness has no borders, no language, no limits. It is the one thing that can travel the farthest, reach the deepest, and never run out.